I sort of compare modern ARIS with a duck. What do you mean? Well, on the surface of the water, what does a duck look like? This serene, sort of beautiful, gliding entity. And underneath, those legs are going like crazy. The engine, the power plant, but it's camouflaged under this serene exterior.
Welcome to the New Process Podcast. Learn all the tools, methods, and best practices combined with people, emotions, and a human-centric mindset to rethink your process and push it to the next level. And here is your host, Mirko Kloppenberg.
Yeah, welcome to episode 15 of the New Process Podcast, where it's all about how ARIS supports you to rethink processes. And I'm going to talk to Caspar Jans and Erlendson from Software AG. So Caspar is Senior Director Transformation Solutions EMEA at Software AG since 2018. He's based in the south of Netherlands. Before working for Software AG, he worked for more than 16 years in several process management, purchasing and logistics positions for DSM, a Dutch life science company. Caspar is a basketball fan. He likes to play golf, to read and watch movies. And he also has a personal website, CasparJans.com. I'll put the link into the show notes, where he collects all of his brain dumps on business process management. Very cool page. I can really recommend to go there. And then we have JM. JM can not only describe software in beautiful words. I would have never come up with the comparison of the duck, which you heard in the introduction of the podcast. JM is lead business process transformation engineer and project manager at Software AG with over 15 years of experience in business process management and project management. He is based in Toronto, United States. He is also the co-host of the What's Your Baseline podcast, focusing on best practices for business process management and enterprise architecture. By the way, I just had the pleasure of being their guest and talking about new process, but more on that at the end of this episode. Besides working in process, JM is, and this is really interesting, a singer and a beatboxer performing with Countermeasure and its associated a cappella groups, recording and releasing multiple award-winning albums and touring around the world. He is a founder and chairman of the board of Sing, the Toronto International Vocal Arts Festival, an a cappella-focused festival and music education charity. I'll put both links also into the show notes. So, both are working for Software AG. Software AG was founded in 1969. It is headquartered in Darmstadt, Germany, with offices around the world. And a very interesting fact, a major part of its shares are owned by the Software AG Foundation that provides support to mentally and physically challenged children. So that's really nice. About 500 employees are working in their business transformation unit, and they are offering the tool ARIS, which recently celebrated its 30th birthday and which we'll explore in today's episode. So, this is what you are going to learn. We are going to explore the underlying philosophy of ARIS. We'll talk about two use cases on how to model processes in ARIS and how employees retrieve their processes in ARIS. We'll talk about how ARIS inspires people for processes, so how ARIS is contributing to the new process principles. And we are also talking about what Caspar and JM are seeing, what is coming up in the tool market in the upcoming years, and what is on the ARIS roadmap, to be more specific there as well. We're also talking about the cost of using ARIS and where you can test it. And there are some parts which I'm not sure if I would have better cut them out, but I decided to leave them in. So really enjoy this funny episode exploring ARIS in more detail.
And now, let's start to rethink processes.
Yeah, welcome, Caspar and JM, to the New Process Podcast. I'm really looking forward to this episode to learn more about ARIS, which I have been using in the past for quite a long time, and then we switched to another tool. So I'm not so familiar with the latest version, and that's why I'm really interested in the latest features there. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great to be here.
Hey, cool. As you know, I'm an airline guy. That's why we are going to start with a check-in. And now we have you both here at the check-in. And I'm going to ask you, what do you prefer, aisle or window seat? Or would you like to sit next to each other? Or should we book separate rows for you? Or how does that really work out here?
Depends on this layout of the plane, I would guess. But I have no problem sitting next to JM, by the way. But I'm an aisle.
Yeah.
Guy. Always, yeah.
As am I. I'm 6'5" and a very large human being, so aisle seats have always offered me a little more relief from the stress of planes. And I'm sure Caspar, you have the similar experience. I used to fly all the time.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. And I'm slightly smaller, but I'm still over 6 feet. So I'm 6'1". So I like to stretch my legs sometimes out into the aisle when there is no carts and stewardesses going up and down. I had that as well. That's also not fun.
I wish for someday we can both get the old business class treatment, my friend. We need to be executives, senior executives, and fly around the world in our business class luxury.
I had that in my previous company where I had the pleasure of flying business class on Singapore Airlines from Amsterdam to Singapore. That was like a mini thing.
I love Singapore Airlines. They're such an amazing airline. I used to fly them back in the late 1990s, early 2000s when I was part of a band that got sponsored by Singapore Airlines, and they were our airline of choice. We didn't fly business class, but we took our coach seats, and still, I also love the Changi Airport. It's a really cool, so many things to do. Even back then, it was such a cool facility.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So JM, you already said you loved Changi Airport. Is that your favorite one, or is there another one which is your favorite?
Yeah, great question. So Changi Airport, obviously, I love that airport. I really enjoy, and I think people are going to really cringe when I say it, but I do enjoy the Frankfurt Airport.
Really?
I don't know what everyone cringes when I say it, but here's the thing. So
what?
Here's the thing. I'm a lover of food, and I love the airport in Frankfurt. I love the airport in Charlotte, North Carolina for two reasons. So the Charlotte Airport is very well laid out. It's got a very easy path with people movers from every spindle to the middle, and the middle has really delicious food. So you jump on a people mover.
I know that.
I remember there was a Southern style sushi restaurant, which was like fusion between Southern style barbecue home cooking and sushi, very unusual. And then you jump back on the people mover. You can make a 20-minute connection in Charlotte. Frankfurt, on the other hand, I've come from Canada, and in Canada, the United States, we have a big problem of food. A lot of our food is really very heavily processed. It's not very fresh. And so when you're passing through these sort of prepackaged spaces, everything feels very sterile. Everything feels very fake. And stepping out in the Frankfurt airport and grabbing a sandwich at one of those kiosks where they've got these big fresh pieces of thick bread with lots of delicious meat and vegetables, and you can smell, and you're like, oh, this is real food. This is real food. And you go, and the seating's not super comfortable, but there's some nice places you can just sort of rest and munch on the food and delicious coffee. And you're thinking, man, what the heck have I been eating back at home? That experience I've had multiple times, and that's why I have such a positive association with Frankfurt.
Okay.
In all honesty, JM, I think that's a major difference between the US and Europe.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's true.
Also outside of the
and then of course my third favorite, one of my other three favorites is the Tokyo Airport. Tokyo is the Tokyo International Airport Terminal, the TIAT. I've got a bunch of bags in my home, still say that, because the shopping is unbelievable, and the amenities are, there's a tea shop with traditional, sort of felt coverings for seating that you can go and enjoy. Itoen, which is one of the really big tea manufacturers in Japan. They have an Itoen cafe based there. It's unbelievably delicious and such a nice, sort of gentle introduction into the world of getting on a plane and flying for 13 hours back home. So that's my third favorite one.
Yeah, cool.
How about you, Caspar? Where are your favorite airports?
Oh God. Well, my favorite one actually is
Really?
Okay.
and the reason it's also the one that I use most frequently because it's just 50 minutes from where I live. I live very close to the German border, so whenever time I fly mostly out of Düsseldorf. So I like Düsseldorf because it's compact. I can go from my seat in the plane to my parked car in 8 minutes when I get back.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
in 8
amazing.
minutes. Yeah, I know.
It's so much time.
I also like Amsterdam Airport because of the same reason. It's a little bit bigger, but it's still compact in the way it's laid out. And I love Helsinki Airport for the sheer fact that Helsinki is really relaxed. I mean, yes, there's a lot of people, but it's not as busy as the big ones. By the way, Frankfurt is on my top 3 to avoid airports in Europe, together with Brussels and Charles. I can tell you that.
CDG. I flew through CDG once, and not once, a couple of times, but like the latest time I flew through it, I was like, this is not going to be on my list anymore of connecting places.
We can talk about processes and Charles all day long and how they do not understand it yet, but let's not hijack this session from it.
So, picking that up, what was not the worst? What was the best process you've ever experienced?
I think that I take inspiration from one of the mentors when I was growing up, who ran a summer camp for children focused on the arts, the Centauri Summer Arts Camp, and one of the 2 founders of the camp was an ISO inspector. Whoa, interesting. See how people come into ISO 9001, processes. So what was he doing running a children's camp? Well, his wife was an author and a playwright, and that he was interested in making something cool for the summer. So when he decided to make a camp, what did he do? Well, he built a process, and not just any process. He built lists and lists and lists, and he organized them by groupings, and he assigned them to different roles and assigned people to roles. And so in the matter of a couple of, like a week or 2, he managed to transform a military academy into a thriving and bustling arts facility through excellent process. And he did it over and over again for 25 years. He refined and honed this process until it was just amazing. It was the precision, the accuracy, the repeatability, the feedback from people to make continuous improvement. Like everything about process was ingrained in how he approached a children's summer camp. And his name is Craig Hartley, and he's an unbelievable inspiration to me.
Yeah, cool. Did you also get an ISO certificate for running the summer camp?
I don't think you're allowed to inspect. I think there's something about the 2-party rule. You have to have a different person inspecting. Segregation of duty, isn't that right?
Yeah. Okay, that's true. So, Caspar, what is your best process ever?
Strangely enough, it was when I was driving towards Schiphol Airport to fly to Boston. And at 4:00 in the morning, and I got a call from United, which I was supposed to fly. They told me that the flight was cancelled. So I said, okay, I'm on my way to the airport. I need to get to Boston. So what do you do? What can you do for me? Well, we already upgraded you and booked you on Air France from Amsterdam to Paris, and then from Paris to Boston, first class on Air France. I can tell you that is not a punishment. But the actual process of rebooking me and getting to the airport and getting everything sorted was so incredibly smooth that even though I arrived 5 hours later in Boston than planned, I was far from being mad at anybody. I was just really, and I had a really interesting conversation on the way from Paris to Boston with a guy in the seat next to me. So for me, that was one of these flights that go like, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be, instead of being in a line in a queue for 3 hours just for a security check. But that was my best experience.
Cool. That perfectly fits to closing the check-in. We're going to boarding here, and to get a little bit closer to the tool itself, how would you describe your relationship to processes, just in a little bit broader sense?
So I got involved with processes, I think, already in my teens. I was having a hobby in astronomy. And in astronomy, everything that happens around in the universe is following a process. Mathematical calculations, but in the end, it's a process. It's a chemical process. It's a physics process. And I got interested in sequential activities being processed, which is basically the definition of a process, let's be honest. So when I graduated from university, I actually graduated on the applicability of process simulation for consultancy. So what can you do with process simulation? And that was back in 1999, just to be completely honest. And then I moved into basically every role I had certainly in my previous company, a large chemical manufacturing company, had something to do with processes all the way up until leading a center of excellence for BPM. And then I find my mothership in software HE about 4.5 years ago, and it's like a warm bath ever since.
Cool. So, JM, what about you?
Well, I think it's funny, Caspar. You and I actually have a similar background in the sense that I've been an engineer my whole life. I mean, there's a lot of things that I do that are not engineering, but I'm an engineer, and I realized that process was the core to that. So I studied engineering in university in my undergrad and master's, and one of the first processes I was ever really truly introduced to was very early on in electrical engineering. So you conceptualize a circuit. And you conceptually, you can draw that circuit out as a process diagram prior to actually building a circuit diagram, prior to actually building the circuit itself. And that was an extremely physical aspect of things. And then you abstract it back, and I started to work more in supply chain and manufacturing engineering. In my studies, and I actually did an internship at a German manufacturing company where I went from designing the sort of the CAD, the 3D end effectors of semi-automated manufacturing lines to going one level back and saying, okay, well, actually, let's take a look at what steps are we doing with what end effectors, what machines do we have to use in which order, and that was my first level of abstraction, even back further to the conceptual, to like the logical process rather than actually the physical process. And I went back and did a master's in manufacturing engineering, focusing on process and process engineering as a discipline, and ended up getting a job in consulting around process engineering for supply chain, and working in that firm where I discovered I had known about ARIS from the end of university. I'd heard about it. I'd sort of dabbled a little bit with ARIS Express back in the day. And then my firm, my consulting firm took on ARIS, and I was like, oh, I'm here. I'm like, let me learn it, learn it up more. And I became, within, a couple of weeks, I became an ARIS architect because I was so into it. And I got really into being a QA analyst through the lens of ARIS. And a couple of years later, I was like, you know what? You said mothership. I got to join the mothership. This is where the magic happens that makes process come to life. And I haven't looked back. It's been 11 and a half years here at Software AG, and I'm really digging it.
Yeah, cool.
So we have more similarities than you think, because I'm an industrial by trade, and the university where I got from in Eindhoven focuses around the manufacturing process. So indeed, designing these logistical processes and manufacturing processes is something I had to do as well.
Yeah, so the Technical University of Eindhoven,
loved
right?
it ever since.
A lot of people come out of that place.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Oh yeah,
it's a good one.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, then let's have a closer look onto ARIS. Let's see how this will work out by just talking about the tool. And there, I'm really interested, especially because I know the tool, or I used it a few years ago. What is the underlying philosophy of ARIS?
Yeah, so, and that's an interesting one. And I will not bore you with what ARIS stands for, because I can hardly ever repeat that properly in one go. But in the end, what the philosophy is it brings together all of the enterprise artifacts that you need to be successful in translating your strategy into execution. As I'm talking about things like roles, activities, systems, organization, risks, all of those things, and that's what I call enterprise artifacts. You need to synchronize them, align them, and optimize and manage them as efficiently as you can. And that is the underlying philosophy of ARIS. It's not just about process documentation. It's about transforming and optimizing and controlling the way that you execute your business, which is a heck of a lot broader than just process modeling.
That's true. Okay, that's interesting. And now I'm curious, how does the tool look like today? So I have vague memories, but how does it look
I have
like
a memory
today?
of the old way of doing things. Yeah, I think it's been a big effort by our product management and our R&D folks, and big ups to them on this. I sort of compare modern ARIS with a duck. What do you mean? Well, on the surface of the water, what does a duck look like? This serene, sort of beautiful, gliding entity. And underneath, those legs are going like crazy. The engine, the power plant, but it's camouflaged under this serene exterior. So to most users, to the vast majority of users, ARIS is a really simple and easy tool to use. So it's an HTML5 based interface. So you use it on your browser. It's a portal. So it is a space for viewing and finding the content you need through things like, type ahead search. So it's easy sort of to tell where you're looking, what you're looking for through easy and interactive links. And then the end state of which is a sort of guided modeling experience. So it helps to put the questions you want to ask into a structure. And then as you answer them, it helps you model along. You can, of course, be the artiste you have in your heart and model manually. But for a lot of our clients, it becomes a really easy way of asking the right questions at the right time to make sure that things are captured where they need to be, which is on the model and like the legs of a duck in the underlying relational database repository, which powers the incredible engine that makes ARIS really powerful. Somehow we made simple and powerful come together in one space, and that's really hard to do. That means you can run simulations. That means you can do process mining. That means you can talk about versioning and variants and rollout of new processes and collaboration and governance in the same breath that you can say, oh, can you just go take a look at this model? Oh, what do you think about it? Oh, great. I'm glad we could have that conversation. That's hard to do. And big props to the new sort of interface that was developed, 6 or 7 years ago that made this really feel like an easy to use tool unless you know the secrets, in which you're like, wow, this is crazy powerful. But you don't need to know it all.
And just to add to that, and I think, Mirko, this might be your experience as well. I mean, in my previous company, I worked with an older version that had the same powerful engine, but it had a bit more of an engineering looking user interface. And a lot of work went, and that's a reputation that I still sometimes see in the marketplace, that when you use the name ARIS, it's that version that they think of, and they haven't seen the one that we've been using now for a couple of years, which indeed is very, I would say, sleek and very calm indeed and serene. And there's no redundancy on the screen anymore. It's just, if it's there, it's there for
and when you say for a couple of years, that was, I think that that version was introduced in 2013. With the first version of ARIS 9. So it's been almost a decade that the ARIS platform has really been a transformed entity.
Oh, it's true.
And for those of you who haven't had a chance to experience it in the last 9 years, or at least a version that is from the last 9 years, it is a dream to work with. As somebody who's been working with it for a decade and a half, that shift was all about end user experience. It wasn't saying, I want to be able to control and manage and hold things tight. All the gears need to work in the way they work, like I'm somebody in the engine room. It's saying that we have citizen developers of processes. We have subject matter expertise that exists across the enterprise. We need to meet people where they are, not ask them to meet us where we are. We're here to facilitate conversation. And to do that, we need to speak everybody's language. That's one of the other key tenets of the ARIS interface, is that it sort of morphs depending on who you are and what you need to see. So you have the same, different perspectives on the same information. Our philosophy of cook once and serve many. And that means that we meet you where you are, what you need to see, and everyone adds their information from their perspective, but it all comes together in one harmonized relational database model.
Okay, so what is the current version number? How do you call the current, I don't know.
ARIS 10.
Okay.
ARIS 10.
Yeah, so ARIS 10, and then we have a service release. Twice a year, we bring out a new service release to make sure that we have the latest functionality covered for the market.
So I was using ARIS even before ARIS 9. I think
Yeah, you said
Yeah,
that
exactly.
one,
Yeah,
yes.
sounds familiar.
As well distributed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Use that one as well. It was a culture shock when I started working for Software AG. I started working with version, I think it was already 10 at that time, just. And that was such a culture shock, a pleasant one. But I fell in love again. But again, most of my work is about consulting customers, and I don't deal with the system like JM does. He's a true master with that one. I'm more on the consulting side.
Okay, so what do you consult to me? How should I map process, or how do you map processes in ARIS today?
No, that's it. Yeah, that's one of the questions I really wanted to be able to answer. Yeah, so here we go. The first thing you do is you don't start with mapping processes. And that sounds controversial maybe, but the first thing you do, and I go back now to the introduction of JM I think we didn't record that, but you start with the mapping a strategy. And you start with mapping and documenting your operating model. And from that point onwards, you'll start to dabble into documenting your processes. And then there's a big question, because what you need to consider is that every piece of content that you put into ARIS serves two purposes. It serves the purpose for creation and maintenance. So you need to be able to create it easily, and you need to maintain it easily and fairly efficient. And you need to be able to consume it even more efficiently. And that last part is actually the most important one. And that's very often either organizations or even products forget about that part. So it needs to be serving both. And it's a balancing act, to be very honest. And what we typically recommend is you can regard the repository of processes as a very big bag with Lego bricks. We all know Lego, right? If you have a big bag of Lego bricks, you'll have different shapes, different colors, different formats, different functions. There's wheels, there's 1x2s, 2x4s, 3x8s, all of them are there. And then you need to think about, how am I going to sort this big bag of Lego bricks? Because that's the main question that you ask yourself when you start talking about process maps. Do I sort them by function, by color, by format, by shape? Or do I sort them to make sure that I can build Hogwarts Castle out of it? Because that has many different bricks of different shapes and different colors in there. And that first perspective is what I call the creation and maintenance perspective. It's a functional decomposition. It's nice. You need that. But that's not something you want to expose to the end users. The end users want to see Hogwarts Castle. They want to see the end-to-end process, preferably, because it's an easier way for them to find their way through the maze of processes. Certainly, if you're working in a large multinational company and you basically have thousands of processes in your repository. So at the moment that you ask me, how do you map processes? Well, strategy first, operating model. Then you look at which major functional domains do I have and which scenarios for end-to-end do I have? And then you start to detail that out until basically you get to that bottom level where you have that single process. And whether that's a BPMN or an EPC, I mean, that's a personal preference, I would say.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think it's always important to think about purpose and strategy first. So that's great.
I don't do.
I heard about that somehow.
That's somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, so let's make it more tangible, and let's talk about new use cases. So imagine, as a process modeler, I want to create a new process in the tool. So how do I proceed? What do I do?
Well, that's a great question. And we have to be able to do all the things Caspar has been talking about. It's important to be able to bring all those things together. But as an end user, we need to make a very streamlined user experience for making processes. So how do you do it so that it's both reusable and also easy? And so the first thing you do is literally use a button that says create new model. It lets you store that model somewhere in the repository. Normally based on your permission set, you'll have a different place that you can put it. So it helps to conceptualize and also contain common processes by business unit, processes in an end-to-end context, depending on how you organize things. Once that's done, you select the type of model you'd like to create. So ARIS ships with, I think, 140 or so types of models out of the box. You're picking from usually a very far reduced list, one that's relevant for the language you'd like to speak at your company. So generally, that we call that a filter. So filters are a method filter that has, so here's the options available to you. As Caspar said, the EPC and BPMN are two of the many standards of business process modeling that we can support.
Yeah.
But let's say you choose one of those that matters to you. You'd like to use that. You simply enter the name and start your process. Now you've got a blank canvas. Now that can be a very intimidating thing. You know, they say that there's nothing more scary to a painter than an empty canvas. Well, we help to make that a little bit easier. First and foremost, there are guidelines and quick reference guides on how you should lay models out based on the standard you have and the business rules and practices you have at the organization. The next thing is that you can pull from a palette on the left side, which is configured by your organization and configurable further by you, with a set of objects that you can place on the model, things that you're going to most commonly put as elements of a process. Think of them as events and functions and sometimes decisions or rules that will help to split the process. Those are the core components of your flow, and you usually design those first. But oftentimes you'll want to add additional information, so auxiliary data that will help to contextualize each step. So around each step, as you put that in the model, either manually through dragging and dropping, or through we call forward modeling, which is using a button that says, I'd like to model something after this, or through using a table-based editor, which is our sort of guided modeling on Rails. You'll create out your flow of information, and then you'll start to ask the questions that go along with it. Who does this? What application system do they use? What data do they require to consume or produce as a result of the step? And you'll create almost little mini SIPOCs for every process step. So the supplier input, process output, consumer, or customer. And that gives you this idea of the ecosystem around any given step. Sometimes that can be represented with a submodel. We call those things function allocation diagrams. Sometimes you can just place it on the model itself and to give you this sort of this multicolored picture into the ecosystem around how your process operates. And all that gets built sequentially. It gets built based off of the subject matter expertise you have, and you don't have to start with everything all on the top of things. You can just go with the flow and then build organically as you develop it. The other thing is that to build processes and reuse common terms. So, for instance, a role called a certain thing is usually called the same thing on all the different processes that role is pertaining to. ARIS has a really cool feature that types ahead for you. So you say, I'd like to put in a ACC, and it says, do you mean accounts payable clerk? Oh, I do mean that. Interesting. So as you do that, as you select from that sort of drop down list, it reuses the object definition or the database record and puts an occurrence on your model. So it is referring to a standard for the organization, but it's reused on your model, so you get for free a whole bunch of things like descriptions and any other information that has been captured about it. Sometimes things like cost rates or number of employees or different, documents that are relevant to it. All those links pop up in the right side panel, which is your information panel. So essentially it's divided into three sections if you think of it. The left side is what am I putting on there? The middle is what am I putting or what am I creating, this canvas? And the right side is give me some details about it. And you go through that process, and frankly, even with very complicated process models, it can be, with ARIS's help, it can be minutes to create something that would normally take you hours or days to hone.
Just one addition to that, because I love the way you described that, JM. The knowledge that you need to create a process map typically does not reside in the head of one person. Right. So you need multiple people to deliver input, and that is one of the things that made it quite cumbersome in the past to process model. The nice thing with ARIS is that you can have one person just draft the outline of the model. So you put a couple of these activity functions and maybe a gateway or two in there. And then you make that process available to what we call contributors. And these people will simply go to the process. They don't have to model anything. They can simply type in the missing details. They're filling in the blanks. So they simply go to the textual overview. They see that the description is empty for that particular activity, and they type in the description, or they type in some more details, or which system is actually being used for it. And they don't have to model for it. It's simply just filling out a form, basically, like you would do with God knows what kind of registration you need to do in your private life. And that really makes it easy, because it reduces the threshold for those contributors. They're typically scared that they need to model.
Right.
But they don't. You just have one person doing an outline if you want, and then push it out.
I love the fill in the blanks analogy, because fill in the blanks is the most friendly way of writing a story. You ask questions. And the more you can prompt people, the lower the barrier to entry is for someone to become involved. And involving more people, leveraging the wisdom of the crowd, bringing subject matter expertise.
Exactly.
Oftentimes hard to reach because of mindsets, people, is all the value in the world. I love it. And you know, Marco, you talk a lot about this people, the people of process. Well, how do you communicate with people? As I said before, you go to them. You talk to them in a way that they can understand. You offer them a gift of reusable information that exists, and you offer them the ability to promote themselves and their information. And now you've got this relationship. And with a relationship, anything is possible.
That sounds very good. So just to go deeper into that direction, now let's imagine I'm just an ordinary employee and I would like to access one of my processes to learn how I should execute a specific task in detail. How do I access this process information or process in ARIS? What do I do? Log in and then?
Well, that's a great question. So we have this really cool feature that I love called My Content. And what My Content does is it allows you to self-identify as a role. So I'm this person, I perform this role. And what it will do is it'll go through the database, query it for you. You won't have to see any of this. And you get a list of all the things that are relevant to you. Mm-hmm. All the processes, all the systems you need to know how to work with, all the documents, all the different steps you need to know how to execute. Literally just a laundry list of all the things you need to know, which is amazing. So you don't have to know what you are looking for to find things that are relevant to you. So that's how you can navigate. Of course, we've got, a search bar at the top, which has type ahead. And we have, usually we call this structuring models to help you navigate through the hierarchy or the end to end to get you to where you need to go. So there's lots of ways of getting to the place you need to be. Once you're where you need to be, so I'm at the right process. Now what we do is ARIS reads the models, understands the logic, and spits it back out to you in what I consider a dynamic SOP, standard operating procedure. So what you normally print out in like a process manual, which by the way, you can, ARIS has a very powerful reporting engine built into it, but you can have it instead re-render it into a dynamic click-through model of what do I have to do next. So every step tells you what was my previous step. You can click on that and go to it. What are my subsequent possible steps and the conditions by which I'll go to those steps? So you can click on one of those. Am I in a corner case or am I as part of my happy path? And on the right side of it gives you all the information you might need. So these are attributes of the objects you're clicking on. So quietly, I'm telling you what's happening in the back end. It's pulling the attributes, but you can also attach things like relevant documentation. You can attach things like screenshots. You can even have links to transactions in things like SAP where you can sort of fire it right from that screen. And so you can actually use it as an operational job aid to literally click through the logic that someone else has written for your process to give you a great starting point to get your job done. And it, once again, it presents it to you in the way you need it. What do I do next?
Yeah, and just to add on to that very briefly, ARIS has a document once, choose from three different perspectives philosophy. So you document typically in the form of a model. So the diagram is one of the three representations that you get out of the box in ARIS anyway. The one that JM just talked about is what we call the steps view, which I love. It's very often used, by the way, by our customers as training models, because you simply click through, and with every step you can also have a little video in there telling you exactly what to do. And then there's of course what we call the general overview, the textual overview, so to speak, where it's just plain text. It just describes, well, it doesn't describe, it just takes the information from all the attributes according to the activities, and it presents it in a textual format, because believe it or not, there's people that like to read more than to look at a diagram. There's only 30% in the world that likes diagrams, I once understood. So we also need to cater to the other 70%. And that's what you do with the three different perspectives, based on the same model information. In
okay. I already realized that there are a number of, I would say, improvements, which were implemented since I used ARIS last time. So like this,
just a few.
But it's definitely a reason why I should have a closer look at the at the current version there.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for giving an overview of how the tool looks like and how to access the information. Now, with regards to the new process principles on, human-centric BPM approach there, to focus on the people, I would like just to pick out two of these principles and ask you how ARIS supports to inspire people for excellent processes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, by the way. And I think the key, what ARIS does is, I would say it almost makes it fun.
Yeah.
Because if it should not feel as necessary evil that you need to go into a system to learn what you need to learn. So what ARIS does, it makes it so incredibly easy to find the information that you need to have, that you become intrigued by it and say, oh, wow, that's how easy it is. And at the moment that you're happy with the information that you consume, automatically you will be much more inclined to make sure that you follow through on that happy feeling, so to speak, and try to do the best job that you can. It also, and that's another side of this, I would say, and the other side of the same coin, making sure that it stays up to date is something that's really underrated in many companies. So the management of change of the content that you have, the easier that is because you have influence on it. So what ARIS does, it makes it really easy for an end user to say, listen, I have an improvement idea for this process. It's just a simple click of a button. You describe the idea that you have and you send it off to the process owner. And then the whole chain of events can be, of course, initiated and triggered. But it's that very easy access to the information and to the influence you have on keeping it up to date is what helps people drive and strive much more for excellent processes.
If I can add on to that a little bit, Caspar, I think one of the cool things that we also do that I've found so many of our clients really care about and talk about a lot these days is we do process mining in the same breath as we say process modeling.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the things that it inspires people for excellent process is giving them good feedback. And one of the ways we do that is by throwing up dashboards to say, well, how well is your process actually performing? Is it meeting spec? Are people following it? So you can inspire people to go and continuously improve, and then with their same breath say, you're making a difference. And here's where.
Yeah.
And not only does that help them prove value to the management, it gives them a sense of satisfaction. You're legitimately moving the needle. One of the things that a lot of people struggle with, I hear this, I do a ton of interviews as part of some of the change management work that I do, is people struggle with times where they feel like the work they do and the outcomes that they're measured on are not directly connected. And when you see, that means what you're doing is essentially random. I am doing my job that I'm told to do, and other people are evaluating the performance of something that I am connected to, even though my job doesn't make a difference. That leads to disengagement, dissatisfaction. That leads to people feeling like process doesn't matter. And that's where we lose you. That's where we lose everything, because process is such a core component of a lot of things that will help to make, your organization and the world better. We talk about this a lot at Software AG with ESG, the environmental, social, and governance, ARIS for sustainability. We have to gain the support of people. We have to win and earn and keep that support and feedback, real good information side by side with your process on how it's actually moving the needle makes a huge difference to inspiring people to even strive to do better and better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's super interesting. And let's pick up one of the other new process principles. So how does the tool, how does ARIS support to design cooperation in and on the process to meet people's needs?
Well, that's a good question. I'll start with the easy one, which is that ARIS is a forum for conversation. So process is the thing we are talking about, but the conversation we are having can range from strategic down to incredibly tactical, has a very human element to it, and all through threads of collaboration. So one of the biggest parts of that is that on every model, on every object, there is a thread of conversation happening, and independent of models and objects, people are maintaining thought leadership spaces. They're using this as a microblog. They're building this community of groups of people that are getting notified, that are being brought into the process, that are having an opportunity to weigh in, feel like their particular opinions are being heard. They can tag parts of the process. I need you to do this. They can even kick off real automated governance within the tool set that logs that a change should be made. That's helping to get their ideas, leverage the knowledge and thought leadership you have in your organization in cooperation with process engineering and strategy to help them collectively design a better future. And that's really hard to do. One of the things that I really love about the way the ARIS does it, and that's why I think I think we're a really good tool in the marketplace, is that it's all push. So you don't have to have these open loops in your head. Should I be working on this? Should I be helping people? Should I? No. You can subscribe to feeds to understand where things are struggling, where changes are happening, where people are having conversations about topics you care about, that push notifications to you, that ask you to come in and weigh in, and in doing so, give you the ability to meaningfully change. And that's cooperation. That helps to get those people's needs, emerge them up, put them at the forefront of our designers' minds, and give them a space in which they can improve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds like a new feature as well. Or
yeah, it's a big part of our like human focused design exercise.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, perfect. So, is there anything else in terms of rethinking processes which you would like to share with the listeners before we go to the more technical parts and outlook and so on?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the one thing I would like to add is that what we see our customers also using ARIS for nowadays more and more, which is it goes away from just documenting a process. It turns into a management system, and making sure that the organization can retain its license to operate. Which is important to a lot of companies in the world. You know that as well. You've worked at Lufthansa, Merco, so you know what a license to operate means. Certainly in manufacturing, but also in other industries nowadays. That is very important, but it needs to mean that you need to prove that you're in control. And that proving that requires two steps, basically. It requires that you, define and document the way that you're supposed to work, and that you prove that is the way that you actually are working, which is that combination that JM mentioned earlier, is between process management and process mining. And ARIS has that integrated into one platform. That makes it super easy. It doesn't mean that there's no work done. I mean, you still need a lot of work. I mean, it is work that you need to do, but it's going to be much more fun now than it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think that I would want to add one more component to this. And I know, Mirko, you also believe, I think, pretty strongly in this, is that process needs to have an element of empathy to it. A lot of times people who are designing processes get into this mindset that the executor of processes is systems. And the systems interchange between people and technology doesn't really matter who's doing it. But that's not the case. People doing process have a journey that they go on. And some of my most successful customers have done internal customer journey mapping in some ways. Actually, exactly that way. They literally do customer journey maps for the internal experience of interacting with their business processes. And in doing that, they force themselves to ask the question, kind of like a Marie Kondo, does this process spark joy? Is this process necessary? Are people enjoying this process? Does this process meaningfully contribute to our business goals and strategic and our strategic aim? And when you ask those questions, or is this step necessary? Is this step really necessary? When you ask those questions and you have a human-centric and empathy-focused process development mindset, what you get out of it is a way of working that people can not just live with, but can thrive with. And I think that's a lot of the organizations I talk to are on that journey, where they're starting to ask people who execute processes what they feel about them. But we're not there yet. So I would encourage all of your listeners to put people in the front of your mind. When you're having an executor run a step in your process, it's not another system. It's a human being designed for their experience, and build processes they can understand. Because when you do that, they'll better conform to the processes you roll out. And more importantly, and to a lot of people, they'll stay at the company. We're in the time of the great resignation. You don't want to make people frustrated with your processes. Help equip them with your processes so you have the best chance of keeping good people, because good people will recognize bad process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
True.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So let's have a look into the future. So what kind of trends do you see developing in the market for BPM tools at the moment for the upcoming years?
So the things I see is more focus on the consumption side. So that is one. So it's not anymore about purely documentation of processes. It's about transforming, optimizing, and controlling the way that you execute business. And I see that trend continuing. It has been started a year, 3-4 years ago, but I see that one coming. So that convergence of risk and control management, process mining, process management into one is certainly a trend that we see. Another trend that I typically see, UX and UI become much more important than it was about, let's say, a couple of years ago. So and that goes along with that consumption part. So the consumption is in the hands of the end user. The end user needs to be treated like the main customer. That's the VIP actually of your BPM part. The experts in the background, they can work with more complex systems than end users can. So it's okay if they need to think about what they're doing a little bit more, but it's the end user that you want to treat like royalty, so to speak. And that's a trend that I see. So a lot of the developments also that we're doing at ARIS, and we've been doing that over the last couple of years, are really focused on that UX UI part.
Okay. So how does
anything? Oh, sorry. Anything I missed, JM?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to unpack in the market. I think that we are moving towards more companies understanding that the process management approach requires a suite of capabilities beyond just digital paper. I think that traditionally there have been a lot of process modeling vendors who will offer you literally just no better than taking a picture of a piece of paper you draw on. And so now we've moved to objects, and then now we're moving to, repositories. But I think that the vendors are more and more realizing that process modeling and process mining are two sides of the same coin. That customer journey and process modeling are two sides of the same coin. That there is, there's data science that is going into process improvement. And so now we see AI and machine learning as part of how you use large sets of data in an organization to drive intelligent, targeted process improvement. And I think that there's, talking about sort of the roadmap of our development and also the industry's development, I think we're also moving a lot towards segmentation between actions that need to be developed as a process change and actions that need to be triggered as a response to process deviation or process struggles. So that's we in our process mining tool, we call that insights to action. That doesn't necessarily require a process change. It requires that the process be adaptable given conditions that would require an action, but no human is involved. And so that's really taking this idea of segmenting the segmentation of duty between people and technology and saying, let's be clear about what we can do without having to involve a person. And then let's see if we can take and aggregate that data into something that we can maybe make that have to happen less over a larger strategic context. I think AI is a big part of what the future is going to hold in terms of recommendations. I think that the process, the knowledge worker of process is all about centralizing a human context model rather than necessarily being as heavily a data interpreter. I heard a senior vice president say that was one of the biggest challenges coming, which is formalizing and harmonizing a human-centric domain knowledge model with a data model. And I think that's absolutely true. People will provide context, but platforms will provide recommendations. And context plus recommendations is a path forward.
Okay, cool. So how does the ARIS roadmap how I'm sorry.
How does the ARIS roadmap? Well, it's okay. I can answer. How does the ARIS roadmap?
Yeah.
Pretty well. It does. It maps the road pretty well.
Look like it looks.
No, how is ARIS roadmap for the next little while?
What can I expect for what can I expect for ARIS 11? So after I missed 10.
Yes. Well, I don't know. The truth is, I don't have all that information. What I can tell you is the trends that I'm seeing in our own company. And those trends are all about breaking down what have conventionally been viewed as different tools, breaking down their barriers. The first thing we did was breaking down the barrier between process mining and process modeling. So now in the same breath, in the same screen, as part of the same exercise, that becomes part of what you do. Mm-hmm. I think the next, another barrier we're breaking down is process mining and process automation. Once again, the same breath, process mining becomes the next best action in our insights to action module for process automation. I think that we're going to continue to break those barriers down so that as a platform, as a united platform, whether it be business architecture, enterprise architecture, business strategy, customer journey, anything from top to bottom of the organization, all of these components live in a platform, as well as all the data lives in the platform and in an integrated ecosystem, so that it's a single one-stop shop for all the things you need to know about process and process improvement. And that's a big change. For a lot of organizations, they Frankenstein together a ton of different capabilities, and they are truly different platforms.
Yeah.
I think Software AG has done a really good job as an integration company of just harmonizing those into a single platform and offering. And I'm seeing a lot of our competitors try and do the same thing. I think they're a little behind us, but I can see what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the same barrier that will go down is the one between risk and control management and process management.
Oh, yeah.
And so we already have an extension around risk and control management, where you do the operational management of the risks that you actually identify in the process model. But even that, we're working on making that one much more integrated towards the future. We don't know when yet, but that's going to be improved certainly.
Okay, that's exactly what I just wanted to ask. Does it make sense to have a look at ARIS 10, or should I wait for 11 now? Is there already a plan for it?
Go to 10. Don't lose any time. Go to 10.
Honestly, like I'm every time a new version comes out, I'm like, oh, this is so great. I love this. I wish I'd had these features, 6 months ago. And I'm like, I keep saying that though. I think they're doing something right.
Yeah.
Take it now. And then now you can evolve as we evolve. So now you're familiar with different components on different screens, and that tomorrow they're on the same screen. And then the next day they're part of the same object. And this is a good evolution you can have as a practitioner with Software AG and its thought leadership.
And I have that when I'm in customers. I very often am joined by one of our local pre-sales experts, and then they show something on the screen, and I go like, "Oh, we can do that now." So I'm not that all that into the technicality. I mean, I love to be around in ARIS. But it's sometimes for me also like, oh God, we're developing fast.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's super interesting. And now the most important question is, what about the price? So let's imagine we're talking about a small company, startup, just maximum 50 employees. What do I have to pay to use ARIS? Or the other case would be a company with 1,000 employees, just to give an example.
Yeah. So it's always a little bit tricky around the pricing, because it depends a little bit on what you want. But if I would assume that you start with just a basic ARIS version, well, not even basic, but an ARIS version where you have a number of designers and a very limited number of administrators, because you typically only need a couple of those last ones. So you have people modeling, doing if you go back to what I said earlier, the creation and maintenance side, and you have viewers that look at everything. So if I would assume that everybody is a viewer and you have 20% of the people being a designer, then for 1,000 people, you would be looking at something around 10K a year, approximately, for the 1,000 people. If you're a startup of 50, you need less. You're around half of that, I guess. If you're a multinational company and you have 150,000 people on ARIS, it will take obviously a little bit more money than that.
And I don't know, for you can go to ariscloud.com or aris-process-mining.com, and our prices for starting are literally listed on the website. So ariscloud.com.
I just add them up. Yeah.
You just literally go there, check it out. The other thing is that you can get started for free. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We do offer free trials.
Yeah, true.
We do offer, even for very small purposes, free uses of the platform. The other thing is that if you're in an educational institution, so if you're a student listening to this podcast, or you're part of a university or a professor listening to this podcast, we have a whole university relations department where you can get free licenses for ARIS at an enterprise class level.
Yeah.
Free instances, free downloads, free everything. Please contact us with the university relations. They've got lots of things you can just literally get for free as a professor to help teach your students how to use the ARIS platform, or just how to use process modeling methodologies and approaches through the lens of the best tool in the marketplace to do so.
Okay, so just again, where do I have to go to if I want to try it out now afterwards?
Yep. ARIScloud.com is a great place to start. So just ARISCLOUD, ARIScloud.com. Or if you're more familiar or interested in ARIS as a process mining tool, ARIS-process-mining.com.
Great.
Both those spaces have lots of information. Of course, you can find all those links and things like that, and even more details about the tool at softwareag.com. That's a great place to start your learning journey.
Okay, great. I'll put the links into the show notes.
Words to live by. Very well.
Perfect. Yeah, great. Okay, so I learned a lot about ARIS today. Thank you very much. And I think we already landed our aircraft here. So is there... yeah.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Is there anything we've missed which you would like to share with our listeners before we leave the aircraft?
I think we pretty much
I
covered
think
it.
the one thing I'd say is, I want to echo what you said earlier, Caspar, is it's never too early to start. If you're waiting to have all the information, all the stakeholders, everything set up, don't. Try it out. Mm-hmm. Go to ariscloud.com, get started working with the platform, and start working with whatever you have. And that's the cool thing about ARIS. You don't have to start with everything. There's an organic uptake process. As you go, you're building reusable assets. So don't worry, you have to have everything right off the bat. And don't go for perfection. We're looking to build processes that are going to be dynamic. They're going to change. They're going to evolve. Know that if you're starting today, you're starting on the right foot.
Okay. Great. So let me add one additional question, just because we had this really entertaining discussion here. Where can our listeners go to if they would like to talk to you, especially to both of you?
In my case, you can always go to CasparJans.com. So it's my personal website. You have my contact information from Software AG as well as all of the brain dumps that I've done over the years around this very topic. I think it's already up into the 70 or 80 articles and postings and guest appearances on podcasts. So you can always go there. You can find me on LinkedIn and just shoot me a note.
Cool. Yeah, same with me. You can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/J-M Erlendson or /IN/J-M Erlendson. ERLENDSON. I also co-host a podcast called What's Your Baseline? So you can go to what'syourbaseline.com/podcast, which is the whole site, to find out all the things we're doing with the What's Your Baseline podcast. And also, I'm sure that Mirko is going to put my contact information on there. Feel free to reach out to me about any topics you want to talk more about. I'm always excited to have a conversation about process and about ARIS.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much. So, final question, how would you describe our flight experience with just 3 words?
Oh, that's a good one. Only 3, that's the issue. Very, very much fun. There you go. I've said it.
Maybe I'll steal a company slogan, even though I don't work for them. I think I call it the Friendly Skies.
Or you could use the other one with that swoosh and just do it.
That's a really good one. I love it. Just do it. That's a good way of putting this.
Just do it. You just do BPM. Just do ARIS. Just do it.
So I hear, Mirko, you're going to get some sponsorships now from an airline and a shoe company. I love it.
Yeah, it couldn't have been better closing words.
Brilliant.
thank you very much. It was a real honor and a pleasure talking with you, learning more about ARIS, and I'm looking forward to wherever we meet again in the future. That's really great. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks
Thanks
very
so much,
much,
friend.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Let's recap today's new process inspiration.
Yeah, ARIS, the beautiful duck. Oh yeah, I think it's more than 10 years ago that I was using ARIS for the last time. So it must have been ARIS 7 point, I don't know, 2 or whatever version that was at that time. And now we were talking about ARIS 10. So obviously there were a lot of changes implemented in between. And after the interview, Caspar was so nice to record a video of the 2 use cases on how to map process and how to retrieve processes. You'll find the link to the video also in the show notes of this episode on newprocesslab.com/episode 15. So there you can also have a visual idea of how ARIS 10 looks like today. Yeah, cool. So let's have an outlook. What is coming up in the next episode will be another interview with a method expert. There we will talk about gamification and how to use gamification to inspire people for processes. That was a super interesting interview, and I still have to deep dive into all the details and to share my learnings with you in the recap of that episode. That was just fascinating. So stay tuned for the next episode. In the meantime, if you would like to learn more about new process, I can definitely recommend to jump over to JM's podcast, the What's Your Baseline podcast. You can find that on what'syourbaseline.com, and I'll put that link into the show notes as well. So this episode was just released this Monday, October 31st, 2022. And that was a really nice conversation with JM and Roland, his co-host of the What's Your Baseline podcast. So that's it for today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye and auf Wiedersehen.
You've been listening to the New Process Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode for more tools, methods, and best practices to rethink your process and push it to the next level. Thank you for listening.
Before you leave, I just want to take the chance to invite you to participate in the New Process Survey, a survey which I'm currently running to learn more about your BPM topics for the year 2023. So what are your topics, your challenges with regards to BPM, and how could I help you? What should be topics of the New Process podcast? What should be the topics I'm exploring into on newprocesslab.com? So it would be great if you participate in the survey until end of November 2022. And to do this, just head over to newprocesslab.com/survey. It would be so great if you bring in your ideas. Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a great day and bye-bye.